Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us back to familiar territory, the eastern slope of the Canadian Rocky Mountains in south-central Alberta, Canada. The area around Waiparous is perhaps the world's current hotbed for grizzly bear attacks. The rolling hills of the Canadian Rocky Mountain foothills invite outdoor enthusiasts of varied interests. Hunters, hikers, campers, loggers, fishermen, and other adventurers are seeking the beauty, resources, and freedom more now than ever before. The forests here are packed with pine, fir, spruce, and aspen trees interrupted by stands of willows and berry bushes along the water sources in the area. Common animals in this area include deer, elk, and moose, and you might even see sheep and goats on the higher peaks to the west. The dominant predators in the area include coyotes, wolves, cougars, black bears, and grizzly bears. It seems that the grizzly bears here are the predatory species that are increasing in their confrontations with human beings. In many of the locations we discuss on this channel, a shortage of food is often a contributing factor to bear attacks, but in this episode, it is actually an abundance of food that does so. On the afternoon of July 19, 2016, 25-year-old Laura Hayworth and her husband James were enjoying sunbathing at Trapper's Campground positioned along the Ghost River. I know what you are thinking. Why do so many of these attacks happen in places with creepy or strange names? In some of the locations of the bear attacks we discuss, the appearance of a mountain shaped like a bear tooth, or named after something with a malevolent sound could be a coincidence, but maybe not. James and Laura had put some thought into their camping trip, at least enough to bring bear spray along with them. They had even practiced dispensing it just in case they may need to. As James and Laura basked in the sunshine just above an embankment along the river, she noticed a rustling in the bushes just a few meters behind them. Laura glanced over and saw something grayish, brown in color moving among the bushes and assumed it was wolves. She stood to her feet and told James to get up. She informed him that she thinks she sees a couple of wolves. James stood to his feet just in time to get a brief glimpse of two grizzly bear cubs. As soon as he did so, his vision was filled with the shape of the biggest grizzly bear he had ever seen, emerging quickly from the bushes only 8 feet from him and his wife. As the bear thundered toward the couple, she let out a roar that shook their bones. She growled and roared as she came at them in fear they were a threat to her cubs. The bear closed in on them so quickly that James had no time to react. Both James and Laura fumbled with the safety cap on their bear spray, but it appeared to be jammed. The bear had bore down on them so quickly that they had no time to properly dispense the spray. At a distance of only a few feet, even if they had managed to operate the bear spray correctly, it would not have been able to disseminate the cloud of irritant in an effective manner. The only thing they could have hoped for was a direct shot in her eyes and nose, but they were not able to complete that. Terror filled James as the attack scene from the movie The Revenant flashed through his mind. He thought he was dead, no doubt about it. He knew there was no way he could avoid her. She bowled him over and took him to the ground. Her immense size and weight forced the reality of the futility of resistance into James's mind. James scrambled back to his feet and started yelling at the bear. She returned to him and knocked him down once again. The sow was running back and forth between him and Laura, briefly confused about who posed a greater danger. James' brain was thinking very quickly, trying to process how to handle and escape from the danger posed by the enraged sow. He quickly told Laura to jump into the river, and he began running toward its banks himself. Just as James reached the river shore, he felt the enormous impact of the sow tackling him from behind. The sow had slammed him down onto the edge of the river and was standing over him with her front paws on the back of his thighs. The only thought racing through James's mind was that he was a dead man. This sow had knocked him down and sent him flying through the air, crashing onto the rocks 3 times now in a matter of a few seconds. She was now holding him under water, which would cause him to drown in a matter of a minute or so. This was clearly not a sow looking only to make sure her cubs were safe, but one that wanted to exterminate any threat to them. Whenever bears attack a prey animal in the water, they are frequently witnessed pulling it into deeper water by the neck or back. Then they climb onto it and force its nose or head underwater, utilizing the water to drown their prey. James was now feeling the same urgency as so many moose, deer, or elk may have experienced from a bear attack in water. Suddenly he felt the sow's weight shift and get off of his thighs. He emerged from the water to see the sow now chasing after Laura. Laura was smaller than James, and the bear knocked her down with just as much force. Laura lifted her hands to her face as she screamed in terror, hoping to ward off the bear's jaws from crushing her skull. James again scrambled back to his feet and sprinted toward the bear and his wife. He watched as the bear stood over Laura's outstretched hands as the bear clamped down on Laura's wrist. It began to dash toward the bushes with Laura bouncing along the ground, in tow. As James gained ground on the bear, dragging his wife, the bear glanced over and saw him. It immediately let go of Laura's wrist and disappeared into the bushes to find her cubs. At this point, James wasn't sure what damage had been done during the lightning-fast bear attack to himself, nor his wife. He ran over to Laura's side and dragged her away from the edge of the bushes. He had hoped the bear would realize the distance between them was safe enough to gather her cubs and flee the area. As James looked up the slope, searching for the bears, he could see the sow and cubs scampering up the hillside. The couple discussed how they could get out of the area without causing another altercation with the sow and cubs. They began making their way along the river shore to a clearer location with bushes. They made noise and yelled as they went, so the sow would know where they were. A little way down the valley, a ranch hand at the Lazy H Ranch, Coleman Blair was helping bring in some hay. He heard the commotion from the attack and looked upstream to see James emerging from the river and Laura underneath the bear as it chewed on her. He usually carried his rifle whenever he went to work, but for some reason he left it at home on this day. By the time he arrived at James and Laura's location, the bear had made its way across the river and was emerging on the opposite bank. In a matter of minutes, James and Laura heard a man's voice yelling in reply to their cries for help. Up at the top of the cliff, they could see two men, one with a red shirt and the other with a dark shirt. James and Laura yelled, "Help! Help!" and told them there was a bear nearby. The two men indicated they knew of the bear and could see that it had departed the immediate area. James and Laura could see one of the men scrambling down the cliff toward them as the other stood watch from above to keep an eye on the sow's location. Blair ran down a large embankment towards the scene. The bear had moved away to the other side of the river by the time he reached James and his wife. He could see Laura's wrist was clearly broken due to its misshapen appearance. She had several deep bite wounds, scrapes, and cuts from being dragged across the rocky ground. James didn't have any bite wounds, but was scraped and bruised from the encounter. He also had an indelible bear paw-shaped bruise on his hamstring from where the sow stood on top of him at the riverbank. Blair stated later that when you see someone getting chewed on by a grizzly, you really can't just stand around. Due to his response, a follow-up attack by the sow may have been avoided. As soon as Blair had reached the couple's location, the three of them began making their way back up the steep embankment. He stated later that Laura was very shaken up by the experience and was chewed up pretty badly. As soon as they had reached the top, James dashed off to fetch the vehicle and rush his wife to get medical attention. He jumped into the vehicle and peeled out toward his wife, sending dirt flying as he went. Blair helped load Laura into the vehicle, and she and James quickly disappeared back down the road in a cloud of dust. A short distance down the dirt road, an ambulance pulled into view. The couple skidded to a stop, and the paramedics went to work on Laura. They began to assess her injuries and bandage them according to severity. They also radioed in for a medical helicopter team to respond for urgent care for Laura. The helicopter arrived at their location a short while later. The entire time the paramedics worked on Laura, she pled for them to tend to her husband, worried that he was also injured by the angry sow. They loaded Laura into the helicopter and flew her to the nearest hospital while James drove himself there in their vehicle. Later, James stated that people need to understand that animals must be respected. He continued to acknowledge that if the sow had wanted to tear them limb from limb, she would have done so. He accepted her behavior as her way of saying, "These are my cubs, get away," and is grateful that the outcome wasn't worse. An inspector with the Fish and Wildlife Enforcement Branch indicated that bear attacks in the Waiparous area aren't that rare anymore. He stated that they have seen a half-dozen bear attacks within the last few years. The attacks have ranged from bluff charges to painful bites to serious maulings. Authorities took clothing from James and Laura to try to pull DNA from the sow's slobber that may have been present on the clothes. They plan to analyze it in an attempt to link the sow with any future problems they may have with her. When it comes to a sow defending her cubs, authorities are always cautious in reacting with lethal force. They stated that grizzlies play an integral part of the ecosystem, and removing one has ripple effects on many other animals and plants in the area. They also plan to close the area for a lengthy amount of time to allow the sow and her cubs to make their way through it. Biologists indicated that this year's wild berry yield in the Waiparous area was a bumper crop compared to adjacent ecosystems. The plentiful food source brought grizzlies from miles around to the location to feast on the sugary, nutritious delicacies to help them gain weight needed for hibernation. This food source is particularly important to sows and cubs, given there is no annual reliable salmon runs around there. After reviewing the details of this episode, I am left with a few questions for you. Do you think the attack was a territorial attack or a defensive one? Could this attack have been avoided if James and Laura hadn't stood to investigate the rustling in the bushes near them? Would a firearm have changed the outcome of this attack, or did it happen far too fast? Would you expect to be attacked by a protective sow when you are sunbathing on a river embankment? As an added challenge, let's see who can list the most contributing factors that led to Laura's survival. I will be glad to read and answer your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.